لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره. Our topic today is Sunni Shia dialogue or Islamic unity. After discussion about interfaith, I think it's very obvious that there should be no hesitation, no reluctance in having a very good relation with the people from other schools of Islam. Not only there should be no problem, but also there must be all reasons to motivate us to be involved in this dialogue of the people of the same religion, the people of the same community. After the demise of the Prophet Mohammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a Jewish person told Imam Ali alayhi salam, ما دفنتم نبيكم حتى اختلفتم فيه. You didn't bury your prophet except that you started disagreeing over him. So he wanted to criticize Muslims that soon after the death of the prophet they started disagreeing each other. Imam Ali alayhi salam gave a response which is in Nahj al-Balagha by saying 317. Maybe in some editions of Nahj al-Balagha a little bit earlier or later, but it's around 317. In my edition it's 317. Imam Ali said, إنما اختلفنا عنه لا فيه. This is a very short statement but very important. إنما اختلفنا عنه لا فيه. It means that we did disagree, but we disagreed over what has been taught by the Prophet. We didn't disagree on the Prophet himself, in the sense that it's none of us who disputes the authority of the Prophet. Just the question is, what was the teaching of the Prophet? ولكنكم ما جفت أرجلكم من البحر حتى قلتم لنبيكم اجعل لنا إلها كما لهم آلهة. But in your case, your feet was not still, dry. It was still wet after you crossed the Nile. And you told your prophet that we want, some idol to worship. And, they have many idols, so at least we should have one idol to worship. And your prophet was with you, and still you were experiencing this great miracle of Allah to be able to cross the Nile safe and sound. So this is the key, that we Muslims never dispute over the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only disagreement that we have is what is the real teaching of the Prophet. Sunni Muslims have different understanding, Shia have different understanding. Then when it comes to details, even among Sunni brothers, you find lots of ideas, different schools, different sects. And according to a hadith which is narrated in many books on theology or kalam or Milal and Nehal, which is Islam, about Islamic schools of thought, they have narrated this hadith, but some of our ulama have deep doubt about this. Some ulama accept, and that is the hadith that the Prophet, according to this hadith, sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the Jewish community were divided into 71 group, and my nation would, the Christian community were divided into 72, and my nation will be divided into 73. And it's only one of them who is saved, Firqatun Najiyah, the one who is saved. And the rest are, not saved, and the rest have gone astray. Then what normally the theologians have done is they have tried to classify different Islamic schools of thought, and they wanted to show who are these 73. And of course everyone has tried to make his own sect the one who is the saved, and the rest, those who have gone astray, are others. But some of our ulama, like Ayatollah Subhani, in his very good book, Milal wa Nahal, which is 7 volumes, thick volumes, he has doubt about this hadith, and he says, we are not sure that this hadith is authentic. Anyway, whether there are 70 or less or more groups or sects or schools within the general umbrella of Islam, there is no doubt that there are disagreements. And this is natural. It's not possible to imagine that a great religion with more than 1 billion, actually about 1.5, some say more, billion of followers should be embraced, should be understood in the same way. It's not possible. Even if you have 100 people in the same place and you teach them the same thing, after you go out and ask them, they have different understandings. So it's not possible to have really very unified understanding of Islam. We should accept that. What is important is that none of Muslims questions the basic teachings of Islam. We all believe in God the Almighty, in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in the fact that whatever comes from the Prophet, we must accept it. We cannot question the authority of the Prophet. We believe in the same Quran, which is very important, without any difference. If you travel to any part of the Muslim world, you don't find any other copy of the Quran. The Quran is the same Quran, and we say our prayer towards the same qibla, same direction. We go to Hajj at the same time. We pray, we fast. All these things are the same. Of course, there are differences, and these differences, if we know how to handle them, would not be a weak point for Islam, if we know how to handle these differences. So, we should know that the disagreement among Muslims is something natural, something which is not avoidable. Of course, maybe if previous generations, were acting in a better way, maybe we could have less disagreements today. But again, we would have other disagreements. Even, if you suppose that all Muslims were from the same sect, again, they themselves would be divided into subgroups. So disagreements are natural, but what is important is that how we handle these disagreements. One suggestion maybe, which is of course very unwise, to say, okay, let's fight and solve these disagreements and see who has the better means and better power and maybe more followers, and get rid of the people who are in minority. This may be one solution that some people, maybe by fighting we can solve the problem, we can come to some agreement. Something which some people in the past have tried, not only in Islam, even in other faiths. For example, if you remember what we said about Europe, all the wars in Europe, which were mostly between the people of the same faith. They were fighting each other. They thought by fighting they can solve these problems. And of course, this is not something which can be sorted out by fighting and killing. The other option is that to say, okay, we don't fight, but we don't need also to be talking to each other, to be in friendship with each other. Just everyone should do his own business and forget about the others. If you are, for example, Shia, just focus on your own mazhab and forget that there are people who are not Shia. And if you are Sunni, forget the Shia. You don't need to kill them, but just forget them and ignore them. And this is the mentality of some people in all different schools of. But this is not also wise. And this is not what the Quran teaches us. The Quran clearly says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. All the believers are brothers. The late Allama Amini, you may know Allama Amini, who is the person who has left for us a very precious jewelry, and that is Al-Qadir, the book Al-Qadir, which is in Arabic in 11 volumes. It's a masterpiece of the contemporary theology, and the main argument in this book is to argue for the hadith of Qadir and for the right interpretation of that hadith and the way it was understood generation by generation among the scholars, among the poets and different groups of people. He is different from Ayatollah Amini, who has several books like Imam Mahdi and about Lady Fatima marriage, who is still living. This is Ayatollah Ibrahim Amini, he is still living, but that is Allama Abdul Hussein Amini, who has passed away. He was in Najaf. He was contemporary, but he passed away some years back. In the beginning, in the introduction of the volume 5 of Al-Qadir, he says that the Shia have always understood the brotherhood among Muslims as inclusive matter, as something which includes people from different sects. It's not that this ayah refers only to the Shia, to the believers in the imamate of Imam Ali. No, all the Muslims are included. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ means all the Muslims. In the third volume, in volume 3, he also has something similar. Unfortunately, there was a person who had some made some accusation against the Shia. I don't want to mention his name. Someone from Egypt. And even, he said that the Shia celebrated when Muslims were defeated by the Russians. When some part of Iran was taken away by the Russians, like Azerbaijan and that area. He made this accusation that the Shia celebrated the defeat of Muslims, forgetting that these were the Shia who were losing, and the Azerbaijan was inhabited by the Shia, and still the Republic of Azerbaijan is mostly inhabited by Shia. Anyway, refuting the idea of this man, Ayatollah Allama Amini said, the Shia, and this is very important that someone like him makes this statement, because you may expect that a person who has devoted all his life to study the hadith of Qadir and has written 11 volumes on hadith of Qadir, he must be very much in favor of the school of Ahlul Bayt, to the extent that he would like to ignore any other Islamic school. But this is not his idea. He says, the Shia, without any exception, respect the lives, the blood, the dignity, the money of all Muslims, whether Shia or Sunni. whenever a catastrophe has happened for Islam in any place, in any region, for any sect, Shia have always had sympathy. And the Shia have never restricted the Islamic brotherhood, which is mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, to the Shia. They have not restricted this to the Shia themselves. They have said that this includes all Muslims. So a person like him, when he makes such a statement, it's very important. So we have this Quranic idea of Islamic brotherhood. And this leaves no place for any sincere Muslim to say, okay, I'm just concentrating on my own sect or on my own people, and I don't want to do anything with the rest of the Muslim world. This is not also possible. When the Quran asks us to be in good relation and friendship with the people of the book, how can we have this position in respect to Muslims? So this is not possible. So what should we do? Certainly we should have some good relation. Certainly we should work for unity, for coming closer. This doesn't mean that any school of Islam should forget his ideas for the sake of unity. No, unless you are convinced, you cannot forget your ideas, you cannot change your ideas. You cannot expect a Shia to become Sunni or a Sunni become to Shia just for the sake of unity. This is not what we expect from people. Even you cannot expect, this is something that some people suggest. We celebrate all our commonalities. Okay, this is okay. But then forget the disagreements. So let us create a new school of Islam which holds all the common beliefs. So whatever is shared by Sunni, Shia, Sufis, Wahhabis, all these groups, we only accept that. Whatever is exclusively Shia or exclusively Sunni, we leave it. And this is also not acceptable because this would be ridiculous. You know, because you are then creating a new school of Islam, which none of the current schools accept. You are creating something that neither Sunni would accept, nor Shia would accept. For example, you know, in respect to the issue of imamah, you cannot say forget the idea of the Sunni and the idea of the Shia. So what else? Either you must accept it or reject it. You cannot say I want to be neutral. So this is not also possible, to forget the disagreements. So what is the wise policy? The wise policy that has been always followed by wise ulama, whether Sunni or Shia, is that each community may have his own idea about Islam, his own understanding of Islam, his own way of practicing Islam. But at the same time, they can be brothers with each other, they can have dialogue with each other, they can discuss academically and scientifically the issues with each other without making each other angry, without making each other upset, without saying that the other party is not a Muslim, is a kafir. This is what we need. We need an atmosphere of brotherhood, real friendship, and openness for dialogue. There is no problem if our Sunni brothers write books to argue for their own mazhab. We don't have any problem. We write books to argue for our own mazhab. There is no problem. What makes problem is, instead of arguing for the truth of our mazhab, we just attack the other party and we say you are not Muslim, you are kafir, you are not honest, you are hypocrite, you are damaging Islam, so on and so forth. This is your intention, this is what you are doing, and then to make life easier for us, then to tell that you believe in this and this and this, the thing that they don't themselves don't believe. It makes the dialogue or argumentation or debate very easy. If you put in the mouth of the other person something that is ridiculous, something which is groundless, so you say this and this is the answer, but that person is not aware of such a thing. So we don't need to forget our mazhab. We don't need to compromise about our mazhab. But at the same time, we don't need to fight. We don't need to create anger. We don't need to be very emotional. Any emotional response, any angry response creates more problem. And this is, I think, the red line for any also academic exchange of ideas. Academic exchange of ideas good, but when you are reaching the borders and you see that the other party is becoming very angry because he feels that he's hurt, he's insulted or offended for any reason, maybe it's not your intention, but that person is not used to this. That's the, I think, end of the exchange. Because when someone becomes very emotional or becomes angry, you can never prove anything for him. When people are cool, there is a chance, not really always, great chance, but there is a chance that you may convince that person or he may convince you. But when you are angry, none of you can convince each other. It's like a debate inside the family. If a husband and wife are cool and, patient, they can change the idea of each other. But if they are angry and everyone wants to prove his own position, then there is no point in continuing the argumentation. Just stop it. There's no point. As we have this hadith in Islam, rahimallahu imra'an taraka al-mira' walau kana muhaqqan. May Allah's mercy be upon the one who stops argumentation when there is no point, there is no benefit, even if he is right. He stops the argumentation, even if he is right. So, we must be very careful, and of course, because we are Shia, so I should tell my own people and my own brothers and sisters that you must be very careful, very cautious about anything that may make our Sunni brothers angry, or they may feel that they are offended or insulted. And inshallah our Sunni brothers also do the same. But we should do this without any condition. Whether there are Sunni brothers or sisters who are behaving appropriately or not doesn't legitimize our bad treatment. And this is the situation that you see in some parts of the world. The Shia are being killed, or being attacked, but our ulama, our maraja, they all, without any disagreement, they say that you cannot retaliate, you cannot do any revenge. Yes, if the criminals are found, they should be taken into the court and they must be punished. But there is no way of saying that all the Sunnis must be blamed or the Sunnis must be punished. No. There is no such a thing among the Shia ulama, among the Shia authorities, among the Shia leaders. If there are some Shia who are uneducated and who are not, really Islamically trained, they have such idea, they cannot represent the mazhab. Alhamdulillah, in Shia Islam, we have clear sense of religious leadership, and we know who can speak on behalf of our mazhab. Okay. I would like to mention 2 points because our time is very short and I want to finish this subject today. One is about Imam Ali alayhi salam's attitudes toward Islamic unity. And second is about a practical example about prayer in a Sunni congregation. Just as an example, as a case, what is our understanding? Imam Ali alayhi salam was in a very critical time because, as you know, it was right after the Prophet, and when the divisions, I don't say started, because the divisions already were in the time of the Prophet. Different, groups of people were formed. But it was when divisions emerged or appeared, and each, group or party was being established. What Imam Ali alayhi salam was doing was, at the same time that he didn't compromise about his position. He never said, okay, I am not supposed to be Imam, I'm not supposed to be the successor of the Prophet, and that was something which we should forget. No, he was always very clear about this matter, that this was the teaching of the Prophet, this was the command of the Prophet, and this was his right to serve as the leader, as Imam. So this is very clear. As I said, we don't want to compromise. But at the same time, Imam Ali, who was the bravest soldier of Islam, when it came to this issue, which is a very important issue, he didn't resort to weapon. He was not frightened of death. And he was not also thinking that this issue is not important issue. If I ask you, is imama more important or your life? Of course, for any Shia, it's clear to say that imama is more important than my life. If all of us are supposed to be killed for the sake of our imams, we would have no hesitation. We would be proud to be killed for the sake of our imams. Why Imam Ali himself was not prepared to be killed? For the sake of establishing imamah, which is more important than every individual imam, because imams also had to serve the institution of imamah. The reason is that there was something which was more important than this, and that was the whole integrity of Islam, the whole survival of Islam was in danger. Imam had no reluctance to be killed, to become martyr. But he himself very clearly said that my only concern and worry is that if we fight, then Islam would disappear. And certainly Imam didn't want Islam to be lost. For example, in Medina, after the Imam became Caliph, said, وَأَيْمُ اللَّهِ لَوْلَا مَخَافَةُ الْفِرْقَةِ بَيْنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ or مَخَافَةُ الْفُرْقَةِ بَيْنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَأَنْ يَعُودَ الْكُفْرُ وَيَبُورَ الدِّينَ لَكُنَّا عَلَى غَيْرِ مَا كُنَّا لَهُمْ عَلَيْهِ. By Allah, if it was not because of the fear of separation among Muslims and fear that this belief that kufr may return and religion would be lost, if it were not because of these, لَكُنَّا عَلَى غَيْرِ مَا كُنَّا لَهُمْ عَلَيْهِ, our treatment with the people who were in charge would be totally different. Ali was not to treat them in the same way that he did, but it was because of these reasons. Or for example, in his letter 62 in Nahj al-Balagha, Imam says, فَأَمْسَكْتُ يَدِي حَتَّى رَأَيْتُ رَاجِعَةَ النَّاسِ قَدْ رَجَعَتْ عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ. Imam said, I didn't stretch my hand. It means that I didn't pay allegiance till I saw that people are starting leaving Islam. People are becoming murtad. People are leaving Islam, going back to kufr. يَدْعُونَ إِلَى مَحْقِ دِينِ مُحَمَّد صلى الله عليه وسلم. There are people who have started, there were people who started calling for the destruction of Islam. فَخَشِيتُ إِن لَمْ أَنْصُرِ الْإِسْلَامَ وَأَحْلَهُ أَرَى فِيهِ ظُلْمًا أو هدما تكون المصيبة به علي أعظم من فوت ولايتكم. Inshallah, refer to Nahj al-Balagha and find this. Imam said, then I was worried, I was afraid that if I don't support Islam and Muslims at that time, who were Islam and Muslim at that time? Was the Caliph and the people. Imam says, I was worried that if I don't support an Islam and the people, and I sit, in my house without any interaction with the Islamic community, then a damage would occur for Islam that it would be much worse for me than losing your leadership, which is a worldly matter. It means that it is just a matter of few years. And Imam Ali has no interest in leadership as such. So, very clearly, Imam says that what was more important for him was protection of Islam, protection of the integrity of Islam. In Sermon 73 of Nahj al-Balagha, after the council finally decided to appoint Osman, after the second caliph, when he was going to die, he appointed 6 people with a very strict procedure to choose who would be the next caliph. Finally, the decision was Osman. Of course, there was no kind of, agreement on that. But anyway, the decision was made in favor of Osman. Then Imam said, لَقَدْ عَلِمْتُمْ أَنِّي أَحَقُّ النَّاسِ بِهَا مِنْ غَيْرِي. Verily you knew that I am more qualified than anyone else. Wallah, by Allah, لَأُسَلِّمَنَّ مَا سَلُمَتْ أُمُورُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. By Allah, I would keep silent. I would surrender as long as Muslim affairs are going in the good way, going smoothly. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهَا جَوْرٌ إِلَّا عَلَيَّ خَاصَّةً. And the only one who is treated unjustly is me. I will accept this. Because he didn't have any personal interest in this matter. What was important for him is overall interest of Islam. And in that situation, when Imam didn't have supporters and followers, you couldn't expect Imam to establish his own government, which if people really supported Imam, that would be much better for Islam. But you didn't have that option open. The only options which were open to Imam was either to fight and make that weak Islamic government which was there even weaker, or to help them so that at least Islam will remain to a certain extent. The only options which Imam had were these two. So this is why Imam alayhi salam Imam paid allegiance finally. Imam alayhi salam even was giving them his advice. You know, Imam was acting like advisor for the caliphs. Imam alayhi salam, for example, in the case of, you know, when the second caliph decided to attack Iran, although it was not, the attack maybe was not according to the advice of Imam, but when they got involved in this war, he had the idea that he himself should go and lead the army of Islam. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, according to Sermon 144, Imam Ali told him not to go. Imam said, because if you go, then the other army would say, okay, the leader of Muslim is here, we should do our best to kill him. And if you are killed, then the army would collapse. So Imam said, it's better you stay behind in the capital of Islam and send some other people. Maybe there would be people who are also more experienced in fighting and who could be also good, you know, to serve this cause. Anyway, so Imam alayhi salam was giving such advice even to protect the life of the caliph. Imam was taking part in prayer, in Jama'ah, in Jum'ah, in Eid prayers. According to Ayatollah Mutahari, he says Imam was even taking part in their prayer. Of course, Imam was not the leader of the prayer, but still he was taking part in the prayer. But Imam didn't accept any position. He didn't accept to become a governor of any part of Islamic world or any, for example, agent for the caliphs. So his position was distinct. So they knew that, everyone knew that Ali is not a man of them. Ali is a man of his own ideas, a man of Allah. But at the same time, helping and supporting whenever they need him. This is very important. So as I said, we don't want to compromise. We don't want to say Sunnis should become Shia or Shia become Sunni. But at the same time, we must help each other. We must support each other. We must be friends. And of course, our situation now is much different from the time of Imam Ali. Imam Ali was in that critical situation, and he was dealing with the people who were themselves responsible. We are not dealing with our brothers and sisters who were not involved in any decision. Just historically it has happened that, you know, they have become people who are living with us in the same age, and, you know, of course, every person according to what he believes, he will become responsible. But this kind of responsibility is different from being actually involved. So we shouldn't think that the people who are today living with us, they are responsible for those things which has happened after the Prophet, or for example has happened to the Lady Fatima, or has happened to Imams, or, you know, we shouldn't blame our Sunni brothers and sisters today for all those things. Okay. I think I should stop here because I have one more important point. Inshallah, just these clues which I am giving you will be helpful. You have been given 3-page letter which I have written in April 2004. One of the brothers asked me about permissibility of Jama'ah prayer with Sunni brothers. So I made a research and I wrote him in response 3-page letter. And I think this is useful, inshallah, for you as well. So because you have the letter, so we can save the time and just quickly review the paper. The question was about Jama'ah prayer with Sunni brothers. After my research, I came to the conclusions that there are indeed 3 questions in our fiqh. One is, in our jurisprudence, our ulama say to be a Shia is a requirement for the Imam in any congregational prayer. You know, in the section when they call about the conditions of Imam, you find that one of the conditions that they mention is to be Shia. This is one point. The second point is whether it is permissible to attend congregational prayers of Sunni brothers. So in this paper, I have argued that these two are two different issues. Although we believe Imam must be a Shia, but this is when we have a Shia congregational prayer. This doesn't mean that if there is a Sunni prayer, you cannot join them. So this is very important because many people refer to their books of fiqh and they say, oh, all Shia have said Imam must be Shia. So how can you pray behind the Sunni? So the question is different. We will talk about it. And the third question, sufficiency of such prayer. Of course, if B is okay, so if you say that it is permissible to say your prayer behind Sunni Imam, then the question is it sufficient or you need to repeat or you need to do something extra? So let's see each of these three. First, requirement of an Imam in congregational prayer. It seems that there is no doubt among our scholars that one of the requirements for an Imam is to be Shia. I found it in Risala of whatever marja I checked, like Ayatollah Khomeini, Ayatollah Khouyi, Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Gulpaigani, and many others. A great authority in Shia jurisprudence, Ayatollah Sheikh Mohammad Hussein Najafi, who is famous as the author of Jawahir, because Jawahir is a very important book on fiqh. In volume 13, page 273, my translation, this is Arabic text, but this is my translation. He says, Imam must have the faith, must have Iman, which means here to be Imami. Therefore, the prayer behind a non-Imami, a mukhalif means person from another school, is not valid. In this is what I have found agreed by all our scholars. And such a ijma, such a consensus is reported by others and is frequently narrated in hadith. So if someone reads this, say, oh, my God, there is no chance any Shia alim, allowing to say your prayer behind the Sunni. But we will see that this is in another context. This is when we Shia want to have an Imam. If you have a mosque, for example, in Shia community, and you are all Shia, then our ulama say, of course, you must look for a Shia Imam. This is obvious. This is something that everyone does. When you have a mosque for Hanafis, even they don't go for Shafi'i, although he's Sunni, they go for a Hanafi Imam. If there is a Shafi'i community, they go for a Shafi'i Imam. So this is the question. The late Ayatollah Khansari, in his Jami' al-Madarik, again, these are scientific books. These Jawahir and Jami' al-Madarik are books with reasoning, with argument. It's not just fatwa. These are the books which ulama study in Dars Kharij, in very advanced level. He says that it is unanimously accepted, and indeed it is an obvious and necessary fact of the mazhab, that Imam must be a 12er Shia. Then he refers to an authentic hadith in Mahasan of Al-Barghi from Imam Ja'far ibn Abi Ja'far the second. Imam Abi Ja'far the second means Imam Jawad. Imam Abi Ja'far without saying second means Imam Baqir. Imam Abi Ja'far the second means Imam Jawad. In which the Imam told the narrator not to say his prayer behind Al-Waqifiyya. And Waqifiyya were the people who were Shia, but they believed up to 7 Imam. And Imam Jawad said, don't say your prayer even behind Waqifis. So when Waqifis have their own prayer, when Shia 12ers have their prayer, they shouldn't ask a Waqifi to lead the prayer. Okay. In my view, all this means that in addition to other requirements, such as justice, for example, one requirement of justice in Adala. In addition to that, the Shia must choose a Shia to act as their imams. Therefore, imams in our congregational prayers, in mosques, shrines, Hussainiyas, etc., must be Shia. However, I think the fact that some people neglect is that this issue A, is different from attending Sunni Jama'ah prayer, which is the second issue. That is to say, one's prayer behind the Sunni Imam that they have chosen for themselves, and they are saying their prayers behind them. You know, so there is a Sunni mosque. Imam is Sunni, the prayers, the people who say prayer are Sunni. I go and want to join them. This is another issue. You cannot say, because Imam is not a Shia, so Imam is not qualified. So there are two different issues. B, permissibility of attending congregational prayers of Sunni brothers. This is the second issue. Let us see what is the view of Shia ulama here. When there is a Sunni Jama'ah, okay? It's not you appointing a Sunni Imam for a Shia mosque. No, it's different. You as a Shia want to join a Sunni Jama'ah. What is the judgment? It seems clear that the Shia are allowed and indeed urged by our Imams to attend Sunni Jama'ah. This will lead to closer ties and unity among all Muslims. This is why people like Ayatollah Sheikh Mohammad Hassan Najafi, the one who was saying that this is the view of all ulama, you remember? Even such an alim, he says that Imams commanded the Shia to say their prayer with Sunnis in Sunni mosques. And indeed Imam themselves did the same. Volume 14, page 71. Okay, you remember what he said? Yeah? He said Imam must have the face, which means here to be Imami, and he said this is consensus. But he says here that the Shia were asked by Imams to say the prayer with Sunnis. Okay. There are many hadiths indicating this fact. The great muhaddis, Sheikh Hurra Amali, in Wasa'il al-Shia. You know Sheikh Hurra Amali's grave is in the shrine of Imam Raza. If you go, there is a basement, you go down and his grave is there. In his book Wasa'il al-Shia, he has a chapter. The title of chapter is this. Chapter 5 on istihbab. Istihbab means to be recommended. Of attending Jama'ah behind an Imam who is not qualified for the sake of taqiyya. Means as Imam is not Shia, but for the sake of taqiyya, which means for the sake of unity here. And also not only to attend the Jama'ah behind such Imam, attending in the first row. فَالصَّفْ الْأَوَّلِ. You should be the first row, just behind the Sunni Imam. The address is there and you can check the address. Another great Shia scholar with some tendency towards akhbarism. I don't know if you know about akhbari. Akhbari Shia were very much against the streamline of the Shia ulama who were following ijtihad and use usul al-fiqh. They were very much saying that we should just refer to hadith And hadith is not enough. We shouldn't go that much to deep intellectual discussions and reasoning. So these are the people who are very much pro-hadith. Of course, we are all, in favor of hadith. But, some people become, sometimes radical. But he is a great alim. And being an akhbari, which means that he is very much interested in hadith of Imam and the sunnah of Imam, still he says this. In his famous book, Al-Hada'iq al-Nadhira, which is a very huge book. It's 25 volumes. And normally our ulama, when they want to issue fatwa, they refer to this book. Like Jawahir, like Wasa'il al-Shia, they read this book. In volume 11, he says, important note, there is a plenty of hadith indicating that it is highly recommended to attend jama'ah of the mukhalifin, jama'ah of the non-Shia Muslims. For example, he reports from Man la yahdhuruhu al-faqih, which is one of our 4 major books of hadith by Sheikh Saduq, Man la yahdhuruhu al-faqih. There is an authentic hadith, sahih, from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, addressing Zayd Shaham. O Zayd, treat the people, here people means Sunnis, with their own treatment. Say your prayer in their mosques and visit their ill people, attend their funeral processions. If you can be imams and muazzins, do that. If they allow you to become their muazzin or their imam, okay. If you do this, they will say that these are Ja'fariyah. So Imam says, I will not be unhappy if you, a Shia, have a role in the Sunni mosque. So Imam is telling the Shia, you shouldn't think that you should boycott and you should isolate Sunnis. If you can be there as muazzin or as imam or as a member of trustee or, in our own current, terms, there's no problem. This is good. If you do this, they will say, these are Ja'fariyah. These are the followers of Ja'far ibn Muhammad who comes to our funeral, who visits our ill people, who attends our mosque. And then they will say, may Allah bestow His mercy upon Ja'far. Rahimallahu Ja'faran. How beautifully he has trained his companions. If you fail to do so, if you are an angry Shia, a radical Shia who always, just insults or offends his Muslim brothers and sisters, they will say, these are Ja'fariyah. These are the Shia. They think that you are a typical Shia. And then, na'uzu billah, they say, may Allah curse Ja'far. How badly he has trained his companions. So either we can bring respect and honor to Ahlul Bayt, or we can bring shame to Ahlul Bayt. This is up to us. He also reports from At-Tahzib, which is another major Shia collection of hadith. We have 4 major collections of hadith, Kutub Arba'ah. One was Man La Yahzur, the second is Tahzib, in addition to Al-Kafi and Istibsar. These 4 are very important. Sheikh Tusi reports from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that he asked Ishaq ibn Ammar. Imam Sadiq asked him, do you say your prayer with Sunnis in mosque or not? This was the question that Imam Sadiq asked him. Ishaq said yes. Then Imam said, say your prayer with them. Surely whoever says his prayer with them in the first row is like the one who is fighting with his sword in the way of Allah. How important it is. Another example is from Al-Kafi. Again, one of the major hadith collection. In a Sahih or Hasan, there is a discussion whether this is Sahih or Hasan. From Al-Halabi, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam told, whoever says his prayer with them, in the first row is like the one who said his prayer behind the apostle of God, behind the prophet, in the first row. And this is why some ulama were always looking forward for some chances so that they can attend Sunni salat and have this great reward. There are many other hadiths conveying the same message. In general, this seems to be very obvious fact in our hadith and among our ulama, that it is very highly recommended to attend Sunni congregational prayers. Okay? So you understand the difference between the first point and the second point. And also you understand that how it's easy to be confused if you are not a learned person. You refer to 10 or 20 books, you find everywhere they say, Imam must be Shia. And then you say, okay, this is the idea of the Shia. But if someone has the whole picture, would know that this doesn't mean that. Okay, the third question is sufficiency of such prayer. This is an area where our ulama may have different views. My investigation shows that there are at least 4 views. I have been able to identify 4 views. I mentioned just 2 views here. Some scholars, like Sheikh Yusuf Bahrani, who has some akhbari tendency, he holds that it is very highly recommended to attend their jama'ah, but according to some hadiths, he suggests to have the intention of furada prayer, individual prayer, and perform your duties as much as possible. So, if you can, you should recite your hamd and surah yourself. And, have the intention of furada. This means that if one intends congregational prayer, that will not be valid. You must have the intention of furada. Furada means individual prayer, not jama'ah. Okay? Of course, he allows doing so, even though you may have another option, like saying your prayer privately. And even though you may not be able to bring some obligatory parts of the prayer. This is very important. He doesn't tell you, don't attend such a prayer and say your prayer in your own room. He says, you should attend such a prayer with Sunnis, but have the intention of the furada and bring as much as parts as possible. Even if you are not able to do, for example, all hamd and surah, he said no problem. The cost of unity is this. This is his view. Is it clear? The second view, some ulama like Ayatollah Khomeini believe in the validity and sufficiency of the prayer behind a Sunni imam. So you do the niyyah of jama'ah, not individual salat. Of course, this means that to say one's prayer with the Sunnis behind a Sunni imam as such is okay. So we don't have problem with this. But one needs to observe conditions such as timing. This doesn't mean that you can say your prayer before the actual time. Okay? This is something additional. If there is a Sunni jama'ah, you attend the Sunni jama'ah with the intention of jama'ah and you just follow the imam. But make sure that it is the time of salat. Because sometimes, for example, according to some Sunni mazhabs, for Fajr, they may start earlier than the actual Fajr. Of course, nowadays, normally in their mosque, they delay salat, and maybe it's okay. But you need to make sure that the timing is okay. Or, for example, the connection must be there. So if you go to Mecca or Medina, for example, you see people, far from Masjid al-Haram, they are joining the Jama'ah inside Masjid al-Haram, and there is no connection. They just hear the voice via radio. This is additional problem. We don't accept this. But if other things are okay, the timing is okay, there is connection, because these are the problem that even if Imam is Shia, we don't accept. Even if Imam of Masjid al-Haram is a Shia, still we say we must be connected. So it's not, we don't want to say our prayer behind them. Even if Imam is Shia, the time must be there. Okay? So just the fact that Imam is Sunni makes no problem. Even if he is not just and adil in our own sense, makes no problem. If he doesn't recite whole surah after Surah Al-Hamd, no problem. If they recite just part. These are the things which are included. But the additional or accidental things, something that may or may not be there, these are the things that we must observe. Okay. In question 482 of Istifta'at, volume 1, page 278 and 279, which was published in Qom, 1987, answering an inquiry about students, and I deliberately picked up this Istifta because this is not about Mecca and Medina. Because some people think that, okay, it's only Mecca and Medina that we should attend the Sunni Jama'ah. No, this is not about Mecca and Medina. The question is about students who study abroad, like UK, like United States, anywhere, and do not attend Jama'ah prayer of Muslims because they have found in Risala that Imam must be a Shia. So these students, they study in some universities or in any places, and there is a Sunni Jama'ah and they don't go because they have found that Imam must be a Shia. And Imam Khomeini says no. Imam Khomeini says that this is not, and Imam says that even if this makes the mazhab to suffer and brings bad reputation, they must attend their Jama'ah. They must attend.